What happens when a sheltered 16-year-old discovers her fairy tale life was built on lies?
Oh, Rosalie.
Lauron thought she was living a dream in her Paris mansion until the night she was sold at an underground auction to the highest bidder, a mysterious millionaire with secrets darker than her worst nightmares. Asterisk, hey Dignity Stories, Z Family. Get ready, today's tale is pure romance, dripping with secrets, surprises, and one twist you'll never see coming. Let's dive in. Asterisk, the auction block felt like ice beneath Rosalie's bare feet, even through the silk slippers they'd forced her to wear. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured rainbows across the room's mahogany walls, her light catching the tears she refused to let fall. 16 years of sheltered luxury had not prepared her for this moment when men in $1,000 suits would bid on her like she was a piece of art. Ladies and gentlemen, Madame Cordelia's voice cut through the cigar smoke, each word sharp as a blade. Our final offering tonight. 16 years old, classically trained in 4 languages, untouched by the vulgarity of modern society, the words struck Rosalie like physical blows. This wasn't the cultural exchange her mother had promised. This wasn't the beginning of her destiny. This was a sale, and she was the merchandise. Her white silk gown felt like a shroud now, the diamonds at her throat cold as winter stars. She searched the shadowed faces before her, looking for any trace of humanity in their calculating stares. Most examined her with the same detached interest they might show a thoroughbred horse or a vintage wine. Their hunger made her skin crawl. The bidding began at a number that could have bought a house. In the suburbs, it climbed higher with each raised hand, each casual nod, each whispered consultation with assistants who spoke in rapid, urgent tones. Rosalie stood frozen, her classical training the only thing keeping her upright as her world collapsed around her. Then a voice from the back of the room cut through all others like thunder. The bid was so astronomical it silenced every competitor. Instantly, heads turned toward the speaker, and even Madame Cordelia's composure cracked for just a moment. "Sold," she announced, though her smile seemed suddenly forced. "To Mr. Montenegro." Sebastian Montenegro stepped into the light as he approached to claim his purchase, and Rosalie felt something shift in her chest. He wasn't what she'd expected from the predators surrounding her, perhaps 38, with dark hair touched, silver at the temples and eyes that held depths she couldn't fathom. His face was aristocratic, carved from granite and shadow. But there was something in his expression that set him apart from the others. While they had looked at her with naked hunger, his gaze held something she couldn't identify, not desire. Exactly, but not indifference either. It was as if he was seeing not just her physical form, but the terrified girl beneath the elaborate costume they'd dressed her in. He stopped 3 feet from the platform and extended his hand. "Oh, Miss Lauron." His voice was lower than she'd expected, roughened by what sounded like years of whiskey and cigarettes. When she hesitated, something flickered in his dark eyes. Not impatience, but understanding, as if he knew exactly how terrified she was. "I won't hurt you," he said quietly, and somehow she believed him. Rosalie placed her trembling hand in his. His fingers were warm, calloused in a way that suggested he'd known work beyond the luxury his expensive suit suggested. The touch sent an unexpected jolt through her, not of fear, but of something else entirely. "Come," he murmured, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in what might have been comfort. "Let's get you out of here." As he led her toward the exit, Rosalie caught a glimpse of the other men's faces. Some looked disappointed, others calculating as if already planning their next move. But Sebastian Montenegro didn't look back. Simply walked beside her, his hand steady on hers, as if he were escorting her to a dance, rather than claiming ownership of her body and soul. The night air hit her like a slap when they emerged onto the Paris street. The city lights blurred through her unshed tears, turning the familiar landmarks into abstract paintings. The Eiffel Tower rose in the distance, its iron latticework now looking more like prison bars than the romantic symbol she'd always imagined. A black Bentley waited at the curb, its engine purring like a well-fed cat. Sebastian opened the door for her, and as she slid across the leather seats, one thought hammered in her mind with brutal clarity. Her mother had sold her, Alina Lauron, who had whispered of love and protection and special destinies, had delivered her own daughter into the hands of strangers like a lamb to slaughter. "Where are we going?" "But she whispered as Sebastian settled beside her. He was quiet, for a long moment, studying her face in the passing streetlights. When he finally spoke, his words carried a weight that suggested they meant more than she could understand. Somewhere safe, at least for tonight. The car pulled into traffic, carrying her away from everything she'd ever known toward a future she couldn't imagine, as the lights of Paris blurred past the windows. Rosalie realized that the fairy tale of her life had ended the moment she stepped onto that auction block. Now she belonged to Sebastian Montenegro, and she had no idea whether he would prove to be her salvation or her destruction. Sebastian Montenegro's penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a building that overlooked the Seine, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Paris that would have taken Rosalie's breath away under different circumstances. Now, as she stood in the center of his living room, the city lights below felt like stars she could never reach again. The space was elegant but masculine, all dark wood and leather, with original oil paintings that probably cost more than most people's homes. A fire crackled in a marble fireplace, casting dancing shadows across walls lined with books in multiple languages. It should have been welcoming. Instead, it felt like a beautiful cage. "You're afraid?" Sebastian said, pouring himself to fingers of whiskey from a crystal decanter. His suit jacket lay discarded over a chair, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms marked with scars that spoke of a past far rougher than his current refinement suggested. "Wouldn't you be?" Rosalie's voice came out stronger than she'd expected, though she wrapped her arms around herself to stop the trembling. He turned to study her, the amber liquid catching the firelight as he lifted it to his lips. "Yes, I would be terrified." The honesty in his admission surprised her. She'd expected lies, pretty words meant to manipulate her into compliance. Instead, he simply watched her with those dark eyes that seemed to see too much. "Why?" she whispered. "Why? What? Why did you buy me? Why did you pay so much when you could have?" She stopped, unable to voice the horrible alternatives. Sebastian set down his glass and moved closer, but not close enough to threaten, "'Cause I've seen what happens to girls like you in places like that. Because someone needed to get you out of there before worse men than me got their hands on you." "Worse than you?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. His smile held no warmth. "Oh, sweetheart. I'm many things, but I'm not in the business of harming children. Some of the men in that room tonight very much are." The endearment should have angered her, should have felt condescending. "Dead." Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten with an emotion she couldn't name. "What happens now?" she asked. "That depends on you." "On me?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I was just sold like cattle. What choice do I have in anything?" Sebastian walked to his desk and opened a drawer, pulling out a thick manila envelope. He held it out to her, and when she hesitated, he set it on the coffee table between them. Inside that envelope is a passport, identification papers, and enough money to start a new life anywhere in the world. There's also contact information for people who can help you disappear completely if that's what you want. Rosalie stared at the envelope like it might bite her. "I don't understand. You can leave tonight if you want. Walk out that door and never look back. I'll tell anyone who asks that you ran away in the night, and I'll make sure no one comes. Looking for you. And if I stay?" Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "If you stay, you become part of my world. You help me with certain business arrangements that require someone with your particular combination of beauty, intelligence, and innocence. You attend social functions, charm the right people, gather information. In return, you live better than most people dream of. You want me to be a spy? I want you to survive. And to help me destroy the network that put you on that auction block in the first place." The words hit her like electricity. "You know about them? About what they do?" "I've been hunting them for 3 years. His voice carried a weight of old fury, barely contained. "It destroyed someone I cared about, and I've been systematically dismantling their operation ever since." Rosalie sank into one of the leather chairs, her legs suddenly unsteady. "My mother. She knew what would happen to me. Yes. The simple confirmation was more devastating than any elaboration could have been. Tears finally spilled over, and she didn't try to stop them. "I'm sorry," Sebastian said quietly. "I know that doesn't help, but I am." She looked up at him through her tears and saw something unexpected in his expression. Pain. Real, raw pain that matched her own. "Who did?" "They destroy?" she whispered. His jaw tightened. "My sister. She was 17 when they took her. By the time I found her, she was already dead." The room fell silent, except for the crackling of the fire. Rosalie understood now why he'd bid so aggressively, why he'd looked at her with recognition rather than hunger. I'd seen his sister on that platform. "I'll stay," she said. "Rosalie, I'll stay." She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "But I have conditions." One eyebrow raised. "You're hardly in a position to negotiate, aren't I?" She stood, drawing on every lesson in poise and presence her mother had drilled into her. "You need me to be convincing in your world of wealthy criminals and corrupt aristocrats. I can't do that if I'm broken. So either you treat me as an equal partner in this, or you might as well hand me that envelope now." For a long moment, they stared at each other across the firelit room. Then Sebastian smiled, and this time there was genuine warmth in it. "What are your conditions?" "I want to know everything. About them. About your plan. About what really happened to your sister. No lies. No protecting my delicate sensibilities. If I'm going to help you destroy them, I need to understand exactly what we're fighting. Done? What else? I want to learn to fight. Really fight. I never want to feel as helpless as I did tonight ever again. I can arrange that. I want your word that when this is over, when we've brought them down, I'm free to leave if I choose." Sebastian was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face. "You have my word." He moved to the window, looking out at the glittering city below. "There's something else you should know. This won't be easy, and it won't be safe. The people we're going after have resources, connections, and no conscience whatsoever. They'll kill us both without hesitation if they discover what we're doing." "Good." The venom in her own voice surprised her. "I hope they try." When he turned back to her, there was something new in his expression. Respect, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit. "Welcome to the war, Rosalie Lauron." As if summoned by his words, his phone buzzed with an incoming message. Sebastian glanced at the screen and his expression hardened. "What is it?" Rosalie asked. "It seems your auction tonight was just the beginning. There's another one scheduled for tomorrow night." He looked up at her, and she saw both fury and calculation in his eyes. 3 girls, all younger than you. The civilized veneer she'd been trying to maintain cracked completely. "Then we stop it. You said I could help destroy them. I meant it." Sebastian studied her for a moment longer, then nodded slowly. "In that case, we need to talk about what you're really walking into, because after tomorrow night there will be no going back." The fire crackled in the silence that followed, and Rosalie realized that her old life hadn't just ended when she stepped onto that auction block. It had ended the moment she chose to stay and fight.
Oh.
She belonged to this war as much as she belonged to the dangerous man who had saved her from a fate worse than death. Three weeks of preparation had transformed Rosalie into someone she barely recognized. The frightened girl who had stood on that auction block was gone, placed by a woman who could slide a knife between a man's ribs while smiling sweetly and discussing Renaissance poetry. Sebastian had been thorough in his education, teaching her not just to fight but to weaponize everything about herself. Now she stood in the mirror of her new bedroom, adjusting the wire hidden in her diamond earrings and checking the poison capsule concealed in her lipstick case. Tonight's target was Marcus Beaumont, French industrialist who used his legitimate businesses to launder money for the trafficking network. He was hosting a private dinner party at his estate in Nair-Susan. And Rosalie would be Sebastian's date. "You look beautiful," Sebastian said from the doorway, and something in his voice made her turn. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean frame. His dark hair was slicked back, revealing the sharp angles of his face, but it was his eyes that caught her attention. They held an intensity that hadn't been there before, something that made her pulse quicken. You look dangerous, she replied, smoothing the black silk of her gown. Good, that's the idea. They'd grown closer over the past weeks, their partnership, deepening into something neither of them had been prepared for. She knew the sound of his footsteps in the hallway, knew that he took his coffee black and couldn't sleep without checking the locks twice. He knew that she had nightmares about her mother's betrayal and that she hummed Chopin when she was nervous. Rosalie. Ah. His voice was softer now, almost hesitant. After tonight, things are going to move very quickly. Once we have Beaumont's files, we'll have enough evidence to bring down the entire network. That's what we want, isn't it? Yes. But he stepped into the room close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark, that made her think of midnight and secrets. I need you to promise me something. What? If things go wrong tonight, if we're compromised, you run. You don't try to help me, you don't look back. You get out, and you disappear. The request hit her like a physical blow. Sebastian, no, we're partners. We're many things. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. But tonight you're the one person in this world I can't bear to lose. The admission hung between them like a live wire, dangerous and electric. Rosalie felt her heart stutter as she realized what she saw in his eyes. It was the same thing she'd been trying to ignore in herself for weeks. Don't, she whispered, even as she leaned into his touch. Don't what? Don't make me care about you more than the mission. Don't make me choose. His smile was soft and sad. Too late for both of us, I think. Before she could respond, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if he was afraid she might pull away. When she didn't, when she instead fisted her hands in his shirt and pulled him closer, it deepened into something hungry and desperate. They broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. This is a terrible idea, she whispered against his lips. The worst, he agreed, and kissed her again. The Beaumont estate was a monument to excess, its Baroque architecture lit by hundreds of torches that cast dancing shadows across manicured gardens. Rosalie played her part perfectly, charming the other guests with discussions of art and literature, while Sebastian worked his way closer to their host. She was deep in conversation with a German banker's wife when she noticed the man watching her from across the room. He was tall and thin, with prematurely gray hair and eyes like chips of ice. Something about him made her skin crawl, though she couldn't place why. When their eyes met, he smiled, and she felt a chill run down her spine. Who is that? She asked Sebastian, when he appeared at her side with champagne. He followed her gaze and his entire body went rigid. That's Victor Kozlov. He runs the Eastern European division of the network. What's he doing here? I don't know, but we need to leave now. Before they could move, Beaumont appeared at their side, his florid face beaming with host's enthusiasm. Mr. Montenegro, you must meet my special guest. Victor has been telling me the most interesting stories about mutual acquaintances of ours. The trap closed around them with the precision of a steel jaw. Victor approached with that same cold smile, and when he spoke, his accent was thick with Russian consonants. Sebastian Montenegro. It has been a long time, my friend, Victor. Sebastian's voice was carefully neutral, but Rosalie could feel the tension radiating from him. And this must be the lovely Rosalie Lauron. Victor's pale eyes fixed on her with predatory interest. Such a shame about your mother, my dear. Elena was one of our most reliable suppliers. The words hit Rosalie like bullets. Suppliers. Oh yes, Elena brought us many beautiful girls over the years. You were simply her masterpiece. He turned back to Sebastian with mock sympathy. Did you not tell her how our dear mama made her? Living how she groomed her own daughter for our particular market? The room seemed to tilt around Rosalie. Her mother hadn't just betrayed her once. She'd been selling girls to these monsters for years, and Rosalie had been the ultimate prize. She'd spent 16 years preparing. You're lying, she whispered, though she could see the truth in Sebastian's stricken expression. Ask him, Victor said with malicious pleasure. Ask your savior how long he's known about dear Elena's business arrangements. Rosalie turned to Sebastian, searching his face for denial. Instead, she saw confirmation and something that looked like shame. How long? Her voice was barely a whisper. "Rosalie, how long have you known?" "From the beginning. I've been tracking Elena's activities for 2 years." Betrayal cut deeper than anything she'd experienced, even deeper than her mother's treachery. Sebastian had known. He'd known what her mother was, what she'd done to other girls, and he'd never told her. "You used me," she said, understanding flooding through her like poison. "You didn't save me from that auction. You bought me to get close to them. It started that way," Sebastian said desperately. "But that's not what this is now. What we have is real. What we have is a lie." Victor watched their exchange with obvious delight. "Such drama. But I'm afraid your little game ends here, Sebastian. You see, we've known about your activities for months. Tonight was simply the perfect opportunity to clean up two problems at once." The sound of footsteps filled the room as armed men emerged from the shadows surrounding them. Rosalie counted at least 8, all carrying weapons that suggested they had no intention of taking prisoners. "Kill him," Victor ordered casually, "but keep the girl. She'll fetch an excellent price in our Dubai auction next month." Happened at once. Sebastian shoved Rosalie behind a marble column as the shooting started, his own gun appearing in his hand as if by magic. She heard him returning fire, heard men shouting in multiple languages, heard the crash of expensive vases as bullets shattered them. "Run!" Sebastian shouted over the chaos. "The kitchen. There's a service entrance." But Rosalie couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The man she'd fallen in love with had been lying to her from the moment they met. He'd known about her mother's crimes, known that there were other girls, and he'd kept it from her while she grieved for the woman who'd raised her to be merchandise. A hand grabbed her arm, dragging her from her hiding place. One of Victor's men had flanked around while she was frozen in shock. She saw Sebastian's face go white as he watched her being pulled away, saw him start toward them. Bullet found its mark. Sebastian went down hard, blood spreading across the white marble floor like spilled wine. His eyes found hers across the chaos. She saw everything he'd never said written in his expression. Love, regret, forgiveness. "Sebastian," she screamed, fighting against the hands that held her. But it was too late. The man she'd given her heart to was bleeding out on a stranger's floor, and she was being dragged back into the nightmare she thought she'd escaped. As they forced her toward the exit, she heard Victor's voice behind them, calm and satisfied. "Load him in the car. If he's still alive when we get to the warehouse, we'll have some questions for him before he dies." The last thing Rosalie saw before they shoved her into a van was Sebastian's still form being lifted by Victor's men, his blood leaving a trail across the pristine marble like breadcrumbs in a fairy tale. But this story, she realized as the van, door slammed shut, was never going to have a happy ending. The warehouse squatted on the banks of the Seine like a cancer, its broken windows staring blindly at the oil-slicked water. Rosalie had been locked in a shipping container for 6 hours, long enough for the reality of her situation to sink in. With brutal clarity, Victor hadn't been bluffing about the Dubai auction. She'd overheard enough conversations through the thin metal walls to know she was one of 12 girls being prepared for transport. The others were younger than her, their muffled sobs creating a symphony of despair that echoed through the warehouse. Rosalie had stopped crying hours ago. Tears were a luxury she couldn't afford if she wanted to live through the night. The container door screeched open, and Victor's silhouette filled the opening against the harsh warehouse lights. Behind him stood 2 guards, their assault rifles casual but ready. "Time to go, little bird," Victor said in his accent, thick English. "But first, you get to say goodbye to your hero." They dragged her across the warehouse floor, past other containers that held God knew what horrors. The space reeked of motor oil, fear, and something else that made her stomach turn. Death, she realized. The smell of death. Sebastian hung from chains bolted to the ceiling beams, his tuxedo torn and bloody, his face a map of fresh bruises. But his eyes were alert when they met hers, and she saw something there that looked almost like relief. "You're alive," he whispered through split lips. "So are you." She tried to keep her voice steady, professional, as if they were discussing the weather instead of their impending deaths. Victor circled them like a shark scenting blood. How touching. The spy and his little protege reunited at last. Sebastian, I must say, using the girl as bait was inspired. though I suspect you didn't plan on actually falling for her. Go. To hell, Victor. Eventually, perhaps. But first, we're going to have a conversation about the location of your evidence files, and about the identities of your contacts in law enforcement. Sebastian's laugh was bitter. You think I'm going to tell you anything? Oh, I know you will. Victor gestured to one of his men who produced a metal case from the shadows. See, we've learned a great deal about motivation over the years. Physical pain has its limitations, but emotional pain? That's much more effective. The case opened with a soft click, revealing an array of instruments that belonged in a nightmare. Victor selected a thin blade, testing its edge against his thumb. The girl dies slowly, he said conversationally while you watch. Every cut, every scream, every drop of blood is on your conscience, unless of course you decide to cooperate. Rosalie felt ice flood her veins as she understood what was happening. They were going to torture her to break Sebastian, and there was nothing either of them could do to stop it. Don't, Sebastian said, and for the first time since she'd known him, his voice cracked with desperation. Please, she's innocent in this, is she? Victor moved closer to Rosalie, the blade catching the warehouse lights. She chose to stay with you. She chose to play this game. Actions have consequences. The knife parted the silk of her dress like it was paper, exposing her shoulder. The first cut was shallow, meant to demonstrate rather than damage, but the pain was immediate and sharp. Rosalie bit back a scream, refusing to give Victor the satisfaction. Stop. Sebastian's voice was raw now, all his careful controls shattered. I'll tell you whatever you want to know. I thought you might. Victor smiled, but he didn't lower the knife. However, I have a better idea. You see, I've been thinking about how to maximize our profit from this unfortunate situation. He turned back to Sebastian with the expression of a man about to reveal a particularly clever joke. The Dubai auction isn't just for young girls anymore. We've discovered that there's quite a market for matched sets, couples with interesting dynamics, shall we say. You and the girl would fetch an extraordinary price from certain collectors who appreciate the complexity of your relationship. The proposal was so horrific that Rosalie felt her mind simply reject it for a moment, then the full implications hit her, and she understood that there were fates worse than death. You're insane, she whispered. I'm practical. You see, killing Sebastian would eliminate a problem, but it wouldn't recoup our losses from his interference in our business. Selling you both, however, that's profitable. Sebastian was staring at Victor with the kind of fury that could have melted steel. I'll kill you for this. No, you won't. Because in about an hour, you'll both be unconscious and loaded onto a cargo plane bound for the Middle East. By tomorrow night, you'll belong to someone who collects beautiful broken things. Victor nodded to his men, and one of them approached. With a syringe filled with clear liquid, Rosalie recognized it from her training with Sebastian. A powerful sedative that would leave them helpless but conscious enough to understand what was happening to them. That's when she made her choice. The poison capsule in her lipstick case had been designed for a very different situation, meant to ensure she could never be taken alive if their mission failed. Sebastian had insisted on it, though she'd never imagined she'd actually use it. Now, as Victor's man grabbed her arm and raised the syringe, Rosalie bit down hard on the inside of her cheek and whispered a prayer to whatever gods protected the damned. Wait, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. I want to make a deal. Victor raised an eyebrow, amused. You're hardly in a position to negotiate, little bird, aren't I? Rosalie straightened despite the chains holding her, drawing on every lesson in poise her mother had ever taught her. You said yourself that Sebastian and I would be worth more as a set, but that's only true if we're both willing participants. Willing? I'll cooperate. I'll play whatever role you want, be whatever kind of broken doll your buyers prefer. But only if you let Sebastian go. The warehouse fell silent except for the distant sound of water lapping against the dock. Sebastian was staring at her with an expression of absolute horror. Rosalie, no. She didn't look at him. Couldn't look at him. If she saw the pain in his eyes, she'd lose her nerve. He's no use to you, dead or crippled, she continued, her voice steady as stone. But alive and free, he's a constant reminder. To everyone in your network about what happens to people who cross you. Let him go, and you get a willing victim instead of a fighter. Keep him, and I'll make your buyers' lives hell until they kill me out of frustration." Victor studied her with new interest. "What makes you think he won't simply come after us again? Because he'll know that if he does, if he causes you any more trouble, you'll make me pay for it. Sebastian Montenegro may be many things, but he's not a man who lets innocent people suffer for his choices." It was the truth, and they all knew it. Sebastian would sacrifice anything, including his own desire for revenge, if it meant keeping her safe. "You clever little bird," Victor murmured, and she heard genuine admiration in his voice. "Very well, I accept your terms. Rosalie, don't do this." Sebastian's voice broke on her name. "Please." Finally, she turned to look at him, memorizing every line of his face, every shadow and scar. When she spoke, her voice was soft with all the love she'd never been able to say. "Someone has to save the other girls. Someone has to stop this from happening again. That someone was always going to be you." She thought about the poison capsule then, about the easy escape it represented. But if she died here, those 12 girls in the containers would still be loaded onto planes. They'd still disappear into the network that had destroyed so many lives. Sebastian would live. He'd be free. Maybe eventually, he'd find a way to save them all. "I love you," she said, and saw the words hit him like physical blows. "That's why I'm doing this." Victor's men were already moving, releasing Sebastian from his chains while keeping their weapons trained on him. He stumbled as his feet hit the ground, his injuries making movement difficult, but his eyes never left hers. "I'll find you," he promised, "no matter how long it takes, no matter where they take you. I'll find you. I know you will." She smiled and meant it. "Don't hurry. Make sure you're ready this time. Make sure you can win." They dragged Sebastian toward the warehouse exit, and Rosalie watched until he disappeared into the night. Only then did she allow herself to feel the weight of what she'd done. Victor approached with the syringe, and she didn't resist when his man grabbed her arm. "Such a noble sacrifice," Victor said as the needle bit into her skin. "Too bad it won't matter in the end. Your Sebastian Montenegro is a dead man. My associates in Prague have orders to kill him the moment he steps off French soil." The sedative was already working, making her limbs heavy and her vision blur. But Victor's words cut through the chemical haze with perfect clarity. She'd saved the man she loved only to send him to his death in another country. As consciousness faded, Rosalie's last coherent thought was a promise to herself. If Sebastian died because of her choice, she'd find a way to make Viktor Kozlov pay for it, even if it was the last thing she ever did. 2 years had passed since that night in the warehouse, and Rosalie had learned to count time not in days, but in small victories. The bruises faded, the broken ribs healed, but the careful web of connections she'd been weaving among victors' network had grown stronger with each passing month. She stood now in the bathroom of a luxury hotel in Dubai, staring at her reflection in the gilt-framed mirror. The woman looking back at her bore little resemblance to the terrified girl who'd been sold at auction. Her auburn hair was shorter now, cut in a severe bob that emphasized the sharp angles of her cheekbones. Her green eyes held depths that spoke of things no person should ever see. The scars were mostly hidden, thin white lines across her ribs and shoulders that mapped the price of her defiance during those first months. She'd learned quickly that compliance was a form of currency in this world, but complete submission meant death. The trick was finding the balance between useful and troublesome. Tonight's auction was being held in the penthouse of the Burj Al Arab, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the Persian Gulf that stretched to infinity. Rosalie had been attending these events for months now, not as merchandise, but as Victor's prized possession. A living trophy who served drinks and made polite conversation while gathering intelligence. The other girls didn't last long enough to earn such privileges. Most were sold within weeks of arrival, shipped off to private collectors or exclusive brothels in cities whose names Rosalie tried not to remember. But she had proven useful in ways Victor hadn't anticipated. Her education, her languages, her ability to move through high society made her valuable for more than just her beauty. She'd used that value carefully, trading information for small freedoms, compliance for the lives of younger girls when she could manage it. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it kept her alive long enough to plan. The plan had taken 18 months to orchestrate. Every conversation with Victor's lieutenants, every overheard phone call, every glimpse at shipping manifests had been another piece of the puzzle. She knew the locations of their warehouses in 12 cities. She knew the names of their buyers, their suppliers, their corrupt officials who looked the other way. Most importantly, she knew that Sebastian Montenegro was still alive. He'd been careful, staying in Prague for exactly 3 weeks before disappearing completely. Victor's assassins had found an empty apartment in a trail that led nowhere. For months after, there had been no sign of him, no disruption to the network's operations. No rescue attempts, nothing. Rosalie had allowed herself to believe he was dead. It was easier that way, easier than hoping he would come for her and knowing that hope was poison in a place like this. Then 6 months ago, things had started going wrong for Victor's organization. A shipment intercepted in Marseille, warehouse raided in Budapest, bank accounts frozen in the Cayman Islands. Each incident seemed unrelated. The work of different law enforcement agencies or rival criminal organizations, but Rosalie knew better. She recognized the pattern, the careful surgical precision that left no loose ends and no survivors to testify. Sebastian was alive, and he was dismantling Victor's empire piece by piece. The bathroom door opened behind her. She didn't need to turn to know who had entered. Victor's reflection appeared beside hers in the mirror, his pale eyes studying her face with the attention of a man who had learned not to trust his most valuable asset. "You seem distracted tonight, little bird." "I'm tired," she said, which wasn't entirely a lie. 2 years of walking a razor's edge would exhaust anyone. Perhaps you're thinking about old friends. His hand came to rest on her shoulder, fingers digging in just hard enough to remind her of her place. "I received some interesting intelligence today. It seems our mutual acquaintance has been busier than we realized." Rosalie forced her expression to remain neutral. "I don't know what you mean." "Of course you don't." Victor's smile was sharp as broken glass. "But I think it's time we reminded Mr. Montenegro what happens to people who interfere with my business. Don't you agree?" The threat hung in the air. Between them, like smoke, Rosalie met his eyes in the mirror and saw her own death reflected there. Victor had grown tired of her usefulness, tired of managing an asset who required constant surveillance. Tonight's auction would be her last, as his prized possession. Tomorrow, she'd be merchandise again. "The buyers are waiting," Victor said, stepping back. "Shall we?" She followed him from the bathroom into the penthouse's main salon, where 38 of the world's worst human beings sat in comfortable chairs, champagne flutes in their hands, and anticipation in their eyes. The girls on display tonight were younger than usual, some barely 14, and the sight of their terror made Rosalie's chest tighten with familiar rage. She moved through the crowd like she'd been trained to do, serving drinks and listening. 2 conversations that revealed the depths of human depravity. A tech billionaire from Silicon Valley discussed the modifications he'd made to his private island. A Russian oligarch complained about the quality of recent acquisitions. Saudi prince outlined his preferences for the evening's selection with the casual air of a man ordering dinner. Rosalie memorized every word, every face, every detail that might be useful if she lived long enough to pass it on. The information was uploaded to a secure server that Sebastian had taught her to access. A digital dead drop that she'd been feeding for months without Victor's knowledge. The auction began at midnight, and Rosalie took her usual position at the back of the room where she could observe without being observed. Victor played master of ceremonies with practiced ease, scribing each girl's attributes like a horse breeder discussing bloodlines. The bidding was aggressive and quick. These men knew what they wanted and had the resources to get it. Rosalie watched fortunes change hands with casual indifference, each transaction representing a life destroyed, a future stolen. She was so focused on memorizing buyer details that she almost missed the figure moving through the shadows beyond the windows. A shape that shouldn't have been there, 30 floors above the street. Clinging to the building's exterior like a spider, her heart stopped for a moment, and began beating so hard she was afraid everyone in the room would hear it. She forced herself to remain still, to keep her expression neutral, even as every instinct screamed at her to run to those windows. Sebastian had found her. The lights went out with the suddenness of a thunderclap, plunging the penthouse into darkness. Emergency lighting flickered on a moment later, casting everything in hellish red shadows that made the elegant salon look like a scene from Dante's Inferno. Chaos erupted immediately. Some of the buyers dove for cover behind furniture, drew weapons from concealed holsters. Victor's security team moved with professional efficiency, forming defensive positions and searching for threats, but they were looking in the wrong direction. The windows exploded inward in a shower of glass and twisted metal as Sebastian came through them like an avenging angel, his black tactical gear making him nearly invisible in the emergency lighting. He moved with lethal grace, his suppressed weapon cutting down Victor's guards before they could react. The auction crowd screamed and scattered, their civilized veneer stripped away by primal terror. Rosalie pressed herself against the wall, watching Sebastian work with the cold efficiency of a professional killer. This wasn't the man she'd fallen in love with 2 years ago. This was something harder, more dangerous, forged by loss and tempered by rage. Victor appeared at her side, a pistol pressed to her temple before she could react. "How romantic," he called out over the chaos. "The knight arrives to save his princess. But I'm afraid fairy tales don't exist in the real world, Sebastian." Gunfire stopped. Sebastian emerged from the shadows across the room, his weapon trained on Victor but unable to fire without risking her life. "Let her go," Sebastian said, and Rosalie heard 2 years of pain in those 3 words. "This is between you and me, is it?" Victor's grip on her tightened. "Because from where I stand, this looks like a man who's about to watch the woman he loves die. Again. Sebastian's voice was perfectly controlled, but Rosalie caught the slight tremor that spoke of barely contained fury. "Oh yes. Did you think this was her first time at auction? Your precious Rosalie has been quite the profitable investment. Dubai, Hong Kong, Moscow. She's seen more of the world than most people dream of." The lie was designed to break Sebastian's resolve, to make him doubt everything he'd believed about her loyalty and her love. Rosalie saw it working, saw the flicker of uncertainty in his dark eyes. "He's lying," she said quietly. Sebastian's gaze never wavered from Victor's face. "How would I know? How would I ever know what they made you do?" The question cut deeper than any physical wound, not because he doubted her, but because she could hear in his voice that he'd been torturing himself with the same thoughts for 2 years. "Because you know me," she said simply. "You know who I am, who I choose to be. Nothing they did to me changed that." For a moment the room fell silent, except for the distant wail of sirens. Then Sebastian smiled, and it was the same smile he'd given her that first night in his penthouse, full of recognition and unexpected warmth. "I do know you," he said. "I know you're wearing the poison capsule I gave you in a hidden compartment of your left earring. I know you've been feeding intelligence to Interpol through our old server. And I know you've been counting steps since I came through that window." Rosalie felt her heart skip. It was right on all counts, including the one that mattered most. She had been counting, and she knew exactly how many steps separated them. "Enough," Victor snarled, pressing the gun harder against her skull. "Put down your weapon or she dies." "No," Sebastian said calmly. "She doesn't." That's when Rosalie moved. 2 years of careful observation had taught her Victor's habits, his tells, his weaknesses. She knew he was right-handed, but favored his left when under stress. She knew he had a blind spot on his right side from an old injury. Most importantly, she knew he'd grown careless with an asset he thought was broken. She dropped to her knees and rolled left as Sebastian's shot took Victor in the center of his chest. The Russians' return fire went high and wide, shattering what remained of the windows behind them. Victor fell backward, his pale eyes wide with surprise, blood spreading across his expensive shirt like spilled wine. He tried to speak, tried to raise his weapon for one final shot, but death claimed him before he could complete either action. The silence that followed was profound. Rosalie stayed on her knees, shaking with adrenaline and 2 years of suppressed emotion. When Sebastian's hands touched her shoulders, she nearly came apart completely. "It's over," he whispered against her hair. "It's finally over." She turned in his arms and saw her own tears reflected in his eyes. They held each other while sirens wailed in the distance, and the lights of Dubai glittered through the broken windows like fallen stars. "The girls," she whispered. "Safe. My team secured them 10 minutes ago. They're already on their way to a facility that specializes in helping survivors. All of them. All of them. In 12 cities, across 4 continents. Victor's entire network is done." Rosalie closed her eyes and felt something she'd almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. Real, honest hope for the future. "What happens now?" she asked. Sebastian pulled back to look at her, and she saw in his expression all the love and patience she could ever need. "And we build something beautiful from the ashes of all this ugliness." "Home," she repeated, tasting the word like wine. "Wherever you want it to be, as long as we're together." The sound of helicopters filled the night air as law enforcement finally arrived. Sebastian helped her to her feet, and together they walked toward whatever future awaited them beyond the broken windows and the settling dust. Behind them, Dubai stretched out like a circuit board of light and shadow, beautiful and terrible, and finally, blessedly, behind them, Rosalie Lauron had been sold as a child and remade as a weapon. But she was walking away from this place as something else entirely. She was walking away free. Asterisk. Support the channel like if this story kept you on the edge of your seat. Share with friends who love intense romance. Subscribe for more emotionally gripping tales. Asterisk. What did you think of Rosalie and Sebastian's story? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let me know which part hit you the hardest. Don't forget to subscribe for more emotionally intense stories that will keep you captivated. From beginning to end, the end.